I'm Jill Rowe, and in this episode of the Different Podcast, I talk with Steve Chalke about shame and guilt. We chat about an experience at an AA meeting and what a revelation it was of honesty and hope. We explore how shame can cause us to feel unworthy and even paralyse us. Guilt, on the other hand, we see can motivate and move us towards transformation and making amends. And together we explore more about believing how we are all loved and lovable. And we wonder how different things might be if we believed we are actually beloved by God. We recognise that we all need champions who affirm that this belovedness is true. So we pray that as you listen, this sense of being beloved finds a home in you. Steve, we're back.
Again.
I feel a bit guilty, actually, because I didn't buy you a coffee today.
Well, you normally do, and that makes me feel guilty because you buy me a coffee, but then not guilty enough for me to remember to buy you a coffee the next time, which makes me feel even guiltier.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So I end up with a load of guilt and a sense of shame.
That's really bad, which is useful because we're going to talk about that today.
But it's true.
It is true. It is true. I was going to say, I'm glad you feel all that, but that would be really bad. I was just remembering a time, Steve, where I went along to an AA meeting. It was an open meeting, so one that someone who doesn't have an alcohol addiction was able to go along. And it was actually
never been to an AA meeting. I've always wondered what it would be like because I hear such great things. But
it is quite an.
I didn't know you could get in.
Yeah, there are two types of meetings, so I would recommend it. It's fascinating and very, very powerful, very, very moving. And I went along to this one. It was actually some preach prep I was speaking at Oasis Waterloo, and I just wanted to bring this thread in around addiction, and I thought, I know where I need to go to understand this. Yeah, well, I take it seriously, as you know. And so I went along to this meeting, and I have never, ever experienced being in a space with a group of, I guess there were 15 people there. That space felt like the most honest, vulnerable, truthful, life-saving space I've ever sat in, because everybody who was there, it felt like, and the words they used, it was a matter of life and death for them to actually be in that space. But there was just this thing that I noticed around shame and guilt, that it didn't feel like a place of shame at all. Which is interesting because outside of the meeting, the kind of language we use around, they're an addict or it's a massive shame thing. But what there was in the room was a really honest, this honesty, which I think has a really healthy connection to a sense of not getting things right all the time, and that guilt word that we have. So, Brené Brown talks a lot, doesn't she, about the difference between shame and guilt.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what is the difference between shame and guilt?
Well, I'm not. If I was Brené Brown, I'm not Brené Brown, but I think shame. The Jill Rowe version. I think shame is this feeling that we have about who we are or who we're not, and that can be utterly paralysing and debilitating, and make you feel like you're nothing.
Right. It's about who
we are. Yeah, our identity. Whereas guilt is the recognition that something we have said or done is wrong and is a motivator for putting things right. So shame is a debilitator, whereas I think guilt is a motivator and an adjuster. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So are you saying guilt is about things that have happened, whereas shame is just the sense of you?
Yeah, probably most simply. Yeah.
There's false guilt.
There can be false guilt.
Which lots of people feel, don't they? Constantly.
Yeah.
I talked to a woman some years ago, who was in floods of tears, and then asked if, I saw her crying, and then, I walked over to her and I sat beside her, and she said, I feel so guilty, I feel so guilty, I feel so guilty. And I said, why is that? She said, well, because I've just gone to the lawyer and I have initiated a divorce from my husband. And I said, well, why do you feel guilty about that? And she said, because I've been taught all my life that divorce is wrong. And I feel such guilt that I've done this. And so we talked, and I effectively said, so what led to it? And she told me that she'd been married to this guy for 20 years, a long time, I can't quite remember. And he had abused her physically, emotionally, and sexually for the whole 20 years. But she told me, I feel guilt because I was taught as a child that divorce is wrong. And that's why I stayed for 20 years, because I knew divorce was wrong. So there was a false guilt, wasn't there? Yeah. So something laid on her.
Yeah, externally imposed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this thing about shame, so many people, we know this, don't we? We have these conversations with people all the time. So many people live with a sense of shame, don't they? Like they have this
embedded in.
Yeah, I am utterly unworthy and utterly unlovable.
I am an imposter.
Yeah, yeah. It's always fascinated me as to why that is so prevalent in people.
So what are the reasons? I can think of some.
Well, why do you think?
Well, I think that shame exists in some people. Well, going back to what I was just saying, because of their upbringing, because of the things we get told as children and as young people, we just believe. So I have lots of friends, I'm pleased to say, who are gay. I cannot tell you the number of conversations I've had, people who are destroyed by a sense of shame for being who they are. I've said on a whole number of occasions, some friends of mine who are gay, in conversation, over a drink or whatever with them, and I've said, well, actually, the truth is there's only one of us in this conversation that's homophobic, and it's not me, it's you, because there's deep
inbuilt sense of
shame for who they are, and yet for me, you're made. I say to you, you're wonderful, you're beautiful, you're made the way God made you. You're celebrate who you are. But well, we all know that sadly the church and other sections of society have drilled this into people, so they live hidden lives, secret lives, because of the sense of shame for who they are.
There's that quote. I'm going to read it out because I absolutely love this quote. God would seem to be too occupied in being unable to take her eyes off of us to spend any time raising an eyebrow in disapproval. I love that.
Yeah, that's great. And it reminds me, I was at this thing the other week. I forget where it was. I genuinely do. I got a dreadful memory. I honestly have. But I can remember what I said. And,
got a lot to remember. That.
And at the end of this thing, whatever it was about, I said, I was asked the question, so how would I sum up the whole of the Bible? And my understanding of it, I said, well, I think the message of the Bible is there's nothing you can do to make God love you more, and there's equally nothing you can ever do to make God love you less. That is the message of the Bible. God is love. There's nothing you can do about it. Just accept it. Celebrate. You are loved. You are beloved. That's such a hard thing for us to grasp. It's a hard thing for me to grasp. I can diagnose it for everyone else. I can pass it on. This is your prescription. You are loved. You're special. You're chosen. You're beloved. But for me to grasp it for myself when I'm in the cesspool of despair, over whatever it is, it's a tougher thing, isn't it?
Yeah, we all need champions around us whose actions and and their words, and even their very explicit words sometimes are, you are beloved. That, you know, like we all need those people. Because when those people go missing, or those voices aren't in our growing up or our experience, you know, even if we have a teacher that we just know that they care about us, it all cements that sense of, actually, I'm of value here in life. Doesn't it?
And when I don't have it,
Yeah,
it really shows.
Then it really shows.
I was on the phone to somebody the other day, the other week, you know, and I was sat in this little office that I was using on my own, and I'd been there all day, believe it or not. You know how it goes.
No loo break.
You have a Teams call, another Teams call, a Zoom call, a phone call, a thing. It just goes on and on all day some days. And it was getting late in the day, and so I just couldn't hold this phone to my ear anymore, you know. But I had to make this call. So I put it on the table and I put on the speaker. But it's just me and this person. And they were expressing how angry they were with some other people, you know, and really, really, really lots of anger in there. And then the person that assists me in lots of my work, I had a meeting with them, and I was, because it was at the end of the day or getting towards the end of the day, you know how all the meetings...
Was your day running a bit late,
Yeah,
Steve?
they all stack into one another. And so she came into the room not knowing that the speakerphone was on and didn't say anything, but she was coming into the room just to say, Steve, we're supposed to be starting our meeting. What are you doing? So she sat quietly as this person poured out all this anger. And then, you know, I wished them well and said goodbye and stopped, you know, switched the phone off, ended the call. And my friend who works with me, the first thing she said, without a second's hesitation or pause, she just said, that person must have had a very critical parent.
Wow.
And I thought, there you go. You're a psychologist.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
I know the story of that person, and it's absolutely true, because this sense of inbuilt, I'm not worth it, shame comes out in anger for other people. I learned that, I think, at the beginning of Oasis, you know, the very beginning of Oasis, when Cornelia and I set up what we call number 3, which is the supported housing unit. That was the very beginning of Oasis in Peckham, still there, of course. These young people came to live with us. I've probably told you this many times before. And we worked so hard. I'd worked so hard. I'd given my whole life to getting this thing going. It'd taken about 3 years preparation, I guess, to get the money together, to buy a house, to kit it out.
Put a roof on.
Yeah, to put a roof on, to put stairs in, to make this a home, not just a house. And these young people who came from fractured and broken backgrounds and had been betrayed by all sorts of people that should have loved them, which was the reason that was our raison d'etre. That was our mission, to create supported housing and a sense of home for these kids. But they arrived, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. They began arriving. And I was really proud of what we'd done, because it was like, what beautiful. And Cornelia, my wife, she's really good with colour and everything like that. It was great. And these kids start arriving. Not one of them looked at us. Not one of them smiled. They all got
didn't say thank you.
Angry with everything the whole time, And then they nicked their own stuff. They nicked the kettles out that room. And I bought this telly, huge telly, so we could watch Match of the Day together. And it was stolen. It was stolen. So that inner pain, they were always angry. And it took me ages to realise it was my problem, not their problem, because all behaviour is communication, and you're communicating your sense of shame or your sense of fear or your sense of abandonment all the time, aren't you?
Yeah.
Communicating all of that. Shall I tell you another story, or do you want to?
No, go.
Do you want to agree?
It's always nice to have. It's nice to listen to your stories.
Well,
Steve.
I have got a friend whom I got to know. Well, I won't tell you how, because I don't want to give it away. But he was a church leader in Northern Ireland, and he went to work. He told me that as a young man, he was Irish. Anyway, he decided as a young man that he was going to go, having trained as a church leader, with his new wife, he told me. They were going to go and they were going to work in one of the toughest housing estate they could find in Belfast, because that's what God wanted him to do. He had this real inbuilt sense. And so off they went and they lived there, and it was tough, and they had paint daubed on their front door, and they had a petrol bomb thrown into their front room at one stage, and all this kind of, but he was running these clubs and trying to bring communities together, and he was beaten up once, and it went on, but they had 2 little children, and their children were growing up there. And then he said, and one day he came home and the house was still and quiet, and he walked into the kitchen, and there, pinned to the fridge, was a note from his wife, and she just said, "I'm gone. It's the end. I can't stand this." Anyway, he lost his job. He lost his wife. He lost his children. And he moved back to the mainland, to Liverpool. He said he ended up working as a taxi driver, but he was completely lost and filled with this sense of shame and guilt. Shame, he just felt he was the most useless man in the world, and guilt for what he'd done to his children and his wife. And one day he couldn't stand it any longer, so he drove to the Bishop's Palace. Yeah, he drove up to the Bishop of Liverpool's palace, and he knocked on the door. And David Shepherd, famous cricketer turned bishop, as you do, he answered it. He was the Bishop of Liverpool. My friend said he welcomed me in like he didn't know me. And he came through and I said, "Oh, I've got to talk to you." He made me a cup of tea, etc. He took me into his study and he sat me down and he talked to me for a bit, and I poured out my story. And then he said, "You know, I've got to go for a while, a couple of hours. I've got an important meeting." But he said, "Stay here. You can stay in my study. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just ponder that painting on the wall." And it was Rembrandt's painting of the Return of the Prodigal Son. Famous painting. Yeah, beautiful painting. And my friend tells me that for the next couple of hours, he just sat looking at this painting thinking, what am I doing this for? And then suddenly, he said, he saw it. Rembrandt, when he paints the father with his arms round his son, who's kneeling there, so shameful that he's blown all the cash and he's wandered away and he's lived a life that his father would have never wanted for him, and he's lost everything. He's hopeless, he's guilty, and he's shameful, and he's utterly broken, and he comes home pleading for a future. And Rembrandt captures the moment when the father has his arms wrapped round his son in love, this wayward prodigal son. But what Rembrandt has done in that painting, and my friend suddenly saw this, is one of the father's hands is masculine, it's big, it's muscular, and the other is feminine, it's gentle. It's not grasping the son, it's caressing the son. And my friend said in that moment, his whole world changed, because he suddenly realized that God was his father and his mother. And that everything he'd ever said to everybody else, but never believed for himself was actually true. He was held. And he was beloved. It's a hard lesson.
Yeah, I was thinking...
tough one to learn.
It's such a beautiful picture. And Henri Nouwen's book...
of the same name.
Yeah, which just goes through all the characters. Just so powerful.
Do you know that book? I don't want to interrupt you, but you should say what you can do. Do you know it sold millions and millions of copies around the world to all sorts of people? The Return of the Lost Prodigal Son.
Yeah. On renew on. I was thinking how, in Genesis, early on, where, these characters, Adam and Eve, are hiding away with shame. Mm-hmm. And then just, whoever was trying to communicate a point through telling that story ascribes these words to the voice of God, which is, hey, where are you? Not, where are you? It's not how you read those three, even, just how you choose to tell that story. Where are you? What have you, you're an idiot. What are you doing? Or, where are you? I'm looking for you. Because I want to be close to you. So Adam and Eve are hiding away, trying not to be found. But the God of love is pursuing them and going, where are you? And it's that realization, isn't it, of there's no shame.
There's no shame. There's nothing. No shame. There's nothing you can do to make God love you more, because there's nothing you can do to make God love you less.
And if that's true, which I think it is, to hold that as your anchor, there's nothing more and nothing less. You are beloved. For that to be the anchoring that you have then, out of which everything else flows in your life.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you about that, because as I've said that to people, like I said it the other whenever it was, the criticism is, well, if that's true, what's the point in bothering about anything? Because the thing that so many people grew up with is, I better be good or else I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So hang on a minute. If I'm really loved and there's nothing I can do to make God love me more, what's the point in bothering? And people sometimes say to me, you take away the reason for even trying in life.
Yeah. It's not love if you're trying to make someone love you. That's not love. For me, it's the reverse. It's, hey, I'm beloved, so I'm going to live in the light of that belovedness. I want to be kind. I want to be compassionate. I want to be generous. I want to be forgiving. I want to be all of those things, because that's the foundation out of which I'm... that's the most amazing invitation for how to live life. It's not, there's no sense of having to please anyone other than, I hope this is this brings pleasure to me to live this way. And I just wonder if you could put a face on God, like that wry smile, in the colour purple, there's that bit where they're going past the lavender field, and there's just that comment, oh, it's God making a pass at us. And I often think, when we're doing that stuff which is in tune with the way of love, I think there's a million moments where God's going, yeah.
So the message is, you're loved, you're in, now
so
live
be
like
love.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Which you've said on numerous occasions. You're loved, so act like it. Yeah.
So to use it as a motivator.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the thing that we, I've done this wrong, so how can I not do that again? For me, at the end of every day, I will think over my day and I'll go, so where did I not do so great today? And we have this brilliant internal nudger, which says, yeah, that wasn't great.
That little internal conversation.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that
Yeah.
all day long, every day.
So to make that intentional time to do that, what in the AA would call a moral inventory of oh, no, well, this wasn't great today. Okay, what do I need? Do I need to apologize to someone? Do I need to do something differently tomorrow so to make amends for what happened? Or next time that comes up, how will I do it so that I live the way of love, as you said?
Yeah.
So that I live that different path.
Yeah, as you talk, Jill, I think of in my experience marriage, because I've been married for more than 4 decades, and I've learned a lot that way, like the motivation of screwing it up. I remember I only ever forgot our wedding anniversary once.
Steve.
I know. We've only been married like 3-4 years. I'm not quite sure.
Worse.
I know. Terrible. I know. You see? There, you're piling on the guilt. That's it. And I hadn't completely forgot. It just slipped my mind because I was really busy with doing so. And then I remembered, and it was about 9:00 that night, but I was in London and we lived outside London then. And so I
Didn't go to a garage.
No, I managed to avoid the go to a garage. Don't go to a garage. That's a bad move to get those garage flowers. You can never disguise them as anything else, can you? No, I got some flowers and I raced home. I probably broke the speed limit. Oh, there you go. Another thing to be guilty about. And I got home and Cornelia was not happy with me. So that's good. You see, you're learning from it. And I said, oh, I just wanted to surprise you at the end of the day. and I'd ordered a Chinese takeaway or something like that. And it was such a disaster. Anyway, I learned. No, and I can still remember it. It's burnt into me. Yeah. So I've never forgotten our wedding anniversary ever again. From then, which reminds me of the Bayer tapestry.
Wow, that's some segue.
Yeah, but it's now I've never seen the Bayer tapestry, but I've read about it so much over the years, and of course it's all about King Harold and his troops and things like that. And the piece that I've read about several times is there's actually a piece of the tapestry with a picture of him. Sticking a long kind of spear thing into the back of a group of troops. He's pushing them forward, this big spear. And underneath it says, Harold comforts his troops. And that's what you're talking about, isn't it, really? You're talking about the kind of comfort that was very difficult and painful as you remember the mistake you've made. But it does prod you. Reminds me of about 3 things I need to do when I get home.
Thank you so much, Steve.